All right. What we're going to do tonight is this event happening late in the day. I'm going to bring my panel in a second. So let's, before I even introduce them, establish at least one thing. There's no one cure-all for this problem. And it's a problem we all talk about. It's a problem everybody at your home, I'm sure, talked about around the dining room table after Newtown happened, after Columbine happened, after Virginia Tech happened. Listen, this has become too much of a common refrain. But what the president had to say, I gotta think the vast majority of us say it makes sense. Later on this hour, I'm gonna bring in my interview I had earlier today with Senator Blumenthal before even this shooting happened. And he said, if the Senate can't even do anything, then we, meaning the Senate body or the electorate in D.C., could have blood on their hands and culpability. And that was even before the Oregon shooting. It has reached a point here where either we become numb to this, which is the most frightening indictment of all, or we're just so paralyzed by inertia that we can't do something that we all agree has to be better than the way it is. All right, let's bring in our panel. We got Jonathan Yed, Democratic consultant with the Advance Group and a former executive director for the Kings County Democratic Party. Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author. Tom Doherty, Republican strategist, partner at Mercury, former advisor to New York Governor George Pataki, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. You know, the problem is, and I'll start with you, Jonathan, the president said it. I'm nodding along. I hear what he's saying. I agree with what he's saying. But I think the likelihood of us getting something done, even though there's not one panacea to fix this thing, is so remote compared to the likelihood that I'm going to be covering another school shooting, whether it's in a grammar school, middle school, high school, or college. And I know it going into it before even the segment began tonight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And listen, the president needs to just bring this to the American people, go out directly and campaign directly to the American people.
But didn't he try that?
Yeah, but not enough. And I think he needs to do it again, and I think he needs to be strategic about it. And basically it comes down to background checks first and foremost, with mental health checks second. I mean, in some states it's easier to acquire a legal firearm than it is to get a driver's license. And that's just ludicrous. And that's just crazy. And I think that if he says that and brings that to the people, he'll get the amount of supports he needs on the grassroots level to try to influence these members of the Senate in particular. I mean, they had this bipartisan bill with Toomey, right, and yeah, Manton in West Virginia, and even then the deal fell apart and they weren't able to get something through. You maybe piecemeal. I mean, try doing things piecemeal through Congress so that you do some of the things that it seems everybody agrees on before we jump to the more high-profile things that are more controversial. I mean, I don't know. But he needs to do more and take it to the American people directly. I mean, this needs to be a major centerpiece of his second term here. He
said it's the biggest frustration. And Dominic, yep, sitting at the table, remember we had the Newtown dad? There was a recent dedication for one of the parks. If you guys remember, I really don't want to shortchange it. I think it was New Jersey firefighters organizations, not even in the state. They put up a lot of the funding, and they had parks, 26 parks dedicated for all the kids and the teachers that were lost at Sandy Hook Elementary and stuff. And in the dedication, I said to him, he's like, I'm not some bleeding heart liberal or even some guy who's invested in politics, but to say something like that could happen in this country, we really, at the end of the day, wouldn't do anything on it except on a state-by-state basis. That's not the country I expected. But still, I mean, I get things being hard, Dominic. I get healthcare reform being hard. I didn't think this would be that hard. Even if it didn't fix the problem, at least try to fix it. Try to do something different. Very little, if anything, out of D.C.
It's hard because of the amount of money that's involved. That's the bottom line. And it's not just Republicans, it's Democrats as well. This is a bipartisan issue where they do nothing because of the amount of money that comes in, the campaign dollars, and the fear at the same time of the NRA. Not just Republicans. Democrats give you a wink on this issue. They talk the talk, but nobody's really doing anything. And that includes the President of the United States. He talks a good game, and he carries a large stick as the president, the bully pulpit. This president could, yes, this Congress doesn't agree with him, it doesn't work with him, but he could up the ante and turn up the heat where he could force them to come to the table and possibly do something.
This is the 74th deadly school shooting since Sandy Hook. 74. That is, as the president mentioned, about one a week since Sandy Hook, when we said everything was going to change and nothing changed. I mean, I agree with the points that both Jonathan and Dominic made about the president needing to step up his game. there was a shift in this country in our view on guns starting around the 1970s as the NRA became more of an influential force in our politics. And they have been influencing this debate steadily now for 40 years. So the president proposing something after Newtown and then easing off the gas after it doesn't go away, that's not going to work. That's not going to make a dent in public opinion. It needs to be a constant drumbeat. It needs to be a steady policy push, and slowly but surely hearts and minds will change, and eventually the votes will follow.
Me?
Yeah.
I've been very consistent about this. I mean, I share, I think, everybody's views at this table. I am not a staunch, the Second Amendment says we have a gun. That was a piece of legislation drafted many, many moons ago. It doesn't guarantee that you get to walk around with an Uzi, that some of my friends on the right would like me to believe. We have a number of problems. First and foremost is that we need the president, because remember, a member of Congress represents a district of X hundreds of thousands of people. He represents the will of those people. He doesn't care what the president or anybody else says. He cares about his own reelection and the people in his district. It's incumbent on the president, if he truly cares about this or any other issue, because he spoke a lot about Obamacare, and he went around this country and talked about it consistently. He'd get a lot of people like myself on board, go around, show some leadership, and talk about it. Don't talk about Syria for 3 days and move on to the next problem. We have a gun problem in this country. People who shouldn't have guns have guns. We need to start where Mayor Bloomberg has formed a group, every town. Background checks. 90% of the country believes we need stricter background checks. Yeah. There are things that we can do and measures we can take, but it's going to take leadership. He's not running again. He has nothing to lose in this battle. He needs to forget about these midterm elections, because quite frankly, his party is not going to do well in these midterm elections. And maybe they'll do better if he talks about guns for a while, because I think the American people, quite frankly, are a little, I think to some degree, look, it's race by race. It doesn't help Hagan in North Carolina. It doesn't help Landreau in Louisiana. But he needs to say, I need to leave here saying I saved 50 kids next year. And he's the only one in this country who can do it. And we all need to say it's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democratic issue. My party has its own problems. I understand that. Because when the NRA comes in and starts threatening Republican members of Congress, they run farther and farther to the right. That doesn't help the situation.
Hey, the NRA, even last week, right? Remember, we saw the pictures of the guys in broad daylight going to Chipotle with an M16 strapped on their back.
How preposterous is that? It's embarrassing.
To me, that was the point where I'm like, oh my God. And the NRA, even on their own site, called it ridiculous, unhelpful,
right.
And they backtracked because they got pushback. I just think it's one of these things that if somebody calls out, they'll realize how small the fringe is that screams the loudest on this issue. And you're right. The way to do it isn't to indict a political party or even a politician or whatever else. It's just to say, listen, we're not going to solve this all, and that's always the problem, I think. Whenever we talk about, hey, if you did a background check, then you find out, well, this person legally purchased it, so that means you don't have to do it at all, right? If you just say, please, it's not going to be perfect, but if we make it a little harder for somebody to get a gun, to at least make sure they're not crazy, or at least they're not dangerous, right? If we stop one thing, that's a good thing.
You know where they'd all do well, and this goes back to the point that we talked about a long time ago. I always said, it's really sad that the president and Boehner can't golf together once a week. But when you have a situation like that photo that we saw, where we all just shook our heads and said, "Are you kidding me?" Why can't Wayne LaPierre, and a member of the Senate, a member of the House who's on the other side, who may not be, the I want every gun, but has a reason, but a mansion or somebody like that.
It would actually help them all out. It would help them.
I was just going to say that. Why can't they, on just one single day, have one single issue where they say, we agree this is absurd?
There's a line we can all agree on, right? Just find one line.
Just one.
The NRA can't even hold to its criticism of people who are wearing M16s into Chipotle's or to other restaurants like that. What makes you think they're going to soften their position on background checks? Are they going to soften their position on health checks? Are they going to soften their position on people of restraining
There are
orders?
clearly issues that they can work together on, okay? It's when you have those type of responses, find one thing where you can reach together, shake hands, and before you know it, 3 weeks later, you're picking up the phone, you're calling a guy and say, let's talk about this. Let's go meet. Let's have lunch. It's the name calling that drags everybody into their own corners, and we get nothing done.
And you know what? And it's from funny way. I know we're on a break. Look what happened with gay marriage, right? look at the end of the day who represented the plaintiffs in a case that at the end of the day wasn't even a case that was heard, but at the end of the day, you had Olson,
Ted
right?
Olson.
And Boyce. Two
Together.
guys who fought each other over a presidential
course.
election, for crying out loud, right?
And they did it, and they did it pro bono.
Right, and you know what? At the end of the day, it wasn't about the right or the left. It was about you knew somebody. You had a kid. You had a cousin. You had somebody you worked with. Now you put a human face on the issue. I don't know who's going to do it, but somebody's going to figure out, like, mothers against drunk driving. Somebody's going to figure out, if it's not this president, and I happen to agree with you and you on this one, somebody's going to figure out how to make this rational. We've gone so far, it's become so crazy that we can't even say an idiot walking in Chipotle with an M16 isn't something that as a country that will put up with anymore.
It's embarrassing.
With gay marriage, more and more of the country said, I know somebody who's gay.
Yeah.
We're getting to the point where a lot of people are starting to get to the point where I know somebody's been the victim of gun crime or gun
just
violence.
the opposite in that case, Andrew, is the problem in that regard is you can never get to that number. The problem, we have so many guns in this country. I have so many friends who are gun owners who are serious about gun ownership in that they take it in a responsible way. They're not the problem.
But they're getting a bad rap because
exactly,
of these guys that are
and
the
that's
problem.
why
so
they
need to step up.
they do exactly.
Yeah.
But again, many of them have, and you saw them. They have worked with the AG in New York with the gun shows, et cetera, et cetera. There are steps that can be done.
All right. Obviously, and unfortunately, we're going to come back to this issue time and time again, I have a feeling here. But when we come back, the big political story, certainly not just from yesterday, but will dominate, trust me, the balance of this week and beyond. Hillary Clinton in her next choice, as she clarifies her comment about being dead broke after she and her husband, former President Bill Clinton, left the White House. I don't see why she had to backtrack on that one. We'll talk about that. I'm sure we'll have a good debate on that. And also what she had to say about Obama's campaign and wanting her to attack Sarah Palin back in 2008. What does a possible presidential bid mean for their relationship?